much, and I feel it's a real honour to be here. I don't quite know how I got here. All I did was draft a letter to a few people in the House of Lords and ask a few people to sign it. I think there's been a shift in the wind in the last few weeks. I think we're seeing a rising tide of appreciation and understanding of what this bill means. We're seeing it in the press, we're seeing it amongst the public, and we're seeing it amongst the health professionals. It's clear that something is wrong with this bill. It just doesn't add up. And there are growing levels of anger as well, quite apart from this growing level of understanding. And I think that anger is related to a feeling that we've been, in some ways, duped, that there's been a campaign of misinformation about what this bill truly means and what it represents. And I doubt very much that there is going to be significant disagreement in this room about the fact that this bill is destructive, it's harmful, and it has to be the last thing the NHS needs right now. But still, I think there's a bit of confusion. First, there's some confusion around the apparent concessions that the government has made in the face of criticisms, and that there is still a view that some of the worst aspects of this bill have been prevented or mitigated as a consequence of amendments. There's also some confusion about what we should do because of a view that the government will steamroller this process anyway. It can't be defeated. It will happen. Therefore, what do we do? The third area of confusion, I think, is emerging now. There's an argument that is being put across that there's been too much change already, that it would be disruptive to halt the process. It would cause more damage to do a U-turn than it would be to continue with the reforms. So I hope, rather than spend much time discussing what the bill actually means and represents, that we can try and address some of these three issues or concerns. I'd first of all like to say that there are, and I'm sure all of you have read them, a set of detailed briefings produced by Alison Pollock and others, including those with constitutional, legal and commercial expertise. The kind of expertise that I think has been absolutely necessary to arrive at an authoritative and informed judgment about the meaning of this bill. And accompanying this is a whole series of articles and analyses that have been published in the BMJ and the Lancet, which make three things clear to me. And John's alluded to some of them, but I think it's worth repeating. The first is that the bill seeks to change the constitutional basis of the NHS. It will change the duties and obligations of the government and the Secretary of State. And the reason for this has never been properly explained to the public. But the reason for it is clearly apparent in the second thing that is clear about the bill. And that is that the bill effectively hands over much of the NHS budget and the duties of the Secretary of State to a new set of statutory bodies that will have discretionary duties and responsibilities, and which will be under obligation to commission healthcare within a compulsory and competitive market. There are also certain responsibilities from the NHS that will shift over to local government, which, as you know, operates under a very different regime. So this too is another profound change to the health system. When you put these two things together, I think the third thing that's clear about the analysis about the bill is that it represents a series of changes, the eventual outcomes of which are simply not obvious. They're simply unstated. They are covert. But if you put the pieces together, if you think about the dismantling of the area-based architecture of the NHS, the emphasis on individuals, the requirement for CCGs to purchase commissioning support from independent market actors, if you put all of that together with the speeches and policy proposals that preceded the bill, If you look at the great interest and investments that have been made by companies such as McKinsey's and KPMG and Kaiser and United Health, the intensive lobbying that has been going on in Parliament for the last few years, I think it becomes pretty clear what this bill is about. I think it becomes clear what the eventual outcome of this bill is designed to achieve. And that is a health system based on a mixed insurance system of health financing operating within a competitive and increasingly private provider market, with the possible emergence of health maintenance type organizations in the future. Essentially, this bill is pushing and transforming the NHS in the direction of a US-styled healthcare system. I think it's been difficult. One of the difficulties for many people is that the real purpose of these reforms have never been made public. And it's no surprise that there's been so much confusion given the clear disconnect between the stated objectives of the bill, which is about putting clinicians in charge, modernizing the NHS, whatever that means, improving efficiency, with the changes that are disrupting the NHS and seeking to commercialize the health system. Another source of confusion, and one that I think is important to consider in today's discussion, is that we're going to have to make increasingly a distinction between the NHS and the health system. At the moment, the health system, or most of the health system, is something that we can equate with the NHS. What these reforms will do will be to change that. We may still have a public NHS. We may still have an NHS, but it will be an NHS that will be completely different from the one that we have now. It will be an NHS located within a much broader health system, comprising a whole range of new actors. It'll be a redefined NHS, it'll be a shrunken NHS, it'll be a more discretionary NHS, and it will be one operating within a much bigger commercialized and competitive environment. And I'm pretty sure I don't need to say anything or to lecture this group of people about market failure and about the problems associated with competition, commerce, and the profiteering that is possible within the healthcare market. I think the real challenge for us is to be able to draw the connection between the bill with all these negative outcomes that all of us are aware about. And we only have to look across the pond to see what those negative outcomes might look like for us in the future. We have a duty, I think, to unmask the real objectives of this bill.